Hi, my name's Zayla, and on the day I thought I was marrying into love, I walked straight into humiliation. My mother-in-law grabbed the microphone and said, "We don't let people like that represent our family." 304 guests stared while I stood frozen, smiling through the sting. But one person in that room decided silence had gone on long enough, and what she said changed everything. The light streaming through the high windows gave the room a golden glow. People were laughing, sipping champagne, leaning in with polished smiles. Every table was wrapped in ivory linen, and crystal glasses shimmered like stars. If someone were to walk in now, they'd say it looked like a dream. But I wasn't dreaming. I stood at the edge of the room, adjusting the lace sleeve of my dress, trying to quiet the buzzing in my chest. My heels pinched. My palms were slick. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But something was off. It wasn't just nerves. It was a low hum in my gut, like a warning. Every bride dreams of this moment, I told myself. Maybe I was just scared of happiness. Across the hall, my mother sat alone at a corner table, her figure small in a sea of designer gowns and sculpted updos. She wore a simple, navy blue dress with short sleeves she'd hemmed herself. Her eyes were soft, but tired. She folded her hands over her lap, where the handkerchief rested, white cloth, embroidered with tiny dandelions. A gift from her to me that morning. For protection, she whispered as she placed it in my hand. I held onto it now like a charm. I caught Margaret's eyes, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. She smiled at me like I was a polite inconvenience, then turned to whisper something to the woman beside her. They both looked over at my mother, then turned away, still smiling. Their side of the room was heavy with legacy and wine lists. Ours carried silence, second-hand suits, and prayers said under breath. Some guests from his side nodded politely at me as I passed. One woman leaned toward her husband, murmuring, "She's lucky. Not many girls like her get to marry up." I kept walking. I've heard worse. In the hallway, earlier that day, I'd overheard a bridesmaid laugh and say, "Some people just don't belong in certain rooms." No one corrected her. And now, sitting among strangers who sipped with pinkies raised and smiled without meaning it, I heard the same tone again. One of the groom's uncles leaned into his wife and said, "She's got charm, just not polish." Like I was a product they had to tolerate. I smiled back, but it didn't reach my eyes. Margaret circled the room like royalty. Her earrings sparkled under the lights, her gown perfectly fitted, her tone perfectly icy. She stopped near a group of men, laughed too loudly, then cast a glance at my mother. She said, pretending to be discreet. "That's not elegance, that's desperation in a dress." I froze. My ears rang. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother sit a little straighter. She had heard, but she didn't flinch. She looked forward, pretending the music held her attention. My throat tightened. I thought of high school, of her working overtime so I could wear a decent prom dress. She'd skipped dinner for 2 weeks. I could feel the kindness cracking in me. Someone tapped a glass. The toasts were beginning. The best man was up first, then my friend from college. Warm, rehearsed, safe. Then Margaret stood. She was all smiles. Holding her glass, she turned slightly toward the crowd, then leaned to the woman next to her and said, not softly, "That woman is no mother. Just a mistake in a dress." The air snapped. A few people chuckled, nervous, confused. Then I heard him, my fiancé, laughing. Just a chuckle, like she'd told a slightly off-color joke. I turned to him. He didn't notice my stare. He was still smiling. The glass in my hand trembled. I looked at my mother. She hadn't moved, but the handkerchief was balled in her fist. I stood. My legs didn't ask for permission. The room shifted. Chairs scraped. Heads turned. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. "The wedding is off. Right now." Gasps. Then silence. Margaret blinked once. My fiancé stared, his mouth open. I didn't give them more words. I turned. But someone else stood up, an older man, gray hair, tan jacket, quiet eyes. Mr. Leonard, a family friend from our side. He walked to the mic. He cleared his throat. "If this is how you treat family," he said, "you don't deserve one." The room broke, half clapping, half paralyzed. I walked back toward my mother. She stood as I reached her. I took her hand. We didn't say a word. And we walked. Down the aisle that should have been ours, through the doors that never shut fast enough. As the heavy wood closed behind us, I leaned toward her. "This isn't the end," I whispered. "It's the unveiling." The apartment was still dark when I opened my eyes. The blinds were drawn, but a faint glow from the city lights pushed against the edges. I lay there for a moment, not moving, not thinking. Just breathing. The wedding dress hung by the door, still zipped in its plastic garment bag. Untouched, like it had never been meant to be worn. My phone was face down on the counter. When I finally flipped it over, the screen lit up with missed calls, mostly from Alec, a few from numbers I didn't recognize. No texts from friends, no messages from his side. Silence had stretched into something physical. I made coffee on autopilot. Measured, poured, pressed the button. Watched the drip. The smell didn't comfort me like it usually did. My mother was still asleep on the pull-out couch, curled up under the old quilt she always carried in the trunk of her car. I didn't wake her. The apartment wasn't large, but it felt cavernous in that quiet. Every sound echoed louder than it should have. The fridge motor, the tick of the clock, the shallow hum of my own thoughts. They wanted me quiet, I thought. So I gave them silence they couldn't ignore. But silence doesn't erase what's already sunk in. I leaned against the counter and, for a moment, drifted backward. 2 years earlier, Galveston. His family had rented a house near the beach for brunch. My first time meeting them all at once. I remember the smell of salt and sunscreen, the way Margaret's pearl necklace sat too tightly on her neck, like she didn't want it touching her skin. She'd smiled at me, wide and cool, and later whispered to someone when she thought I wasn't listening, "She's fiery." A lot to take in. When I told Alec, he laughed. "She's old school. Don't take it personal." I did, but I didn't say it. I was trying too hard to belong. She never learned my mom's name. Always said, "Your mom," like it was a nuisance, not a person. On Thanksgiving, my mom sat at the far end of the table while Margaret told a story about a charity gala. When my mother tried to chime in, just once, Margaret cut her off with a polite, "Oh, how sweet," and kept going like she hadn't heard her at all. That kind of thing didn't come with bruises. But it stung just the same. It wasn't one cut, I whispered into the coffee. It was 1,000 paper-thin wounds no one else seemed to see. Last night played again in pieces. The way Alec laughed. The way he didn't even look at me when I stood. But what gutted me most wasn't the insult. It was the moment before, the night before the wedding, when I finally asked him to do something about it. "She's cruel, Alec," I'd said. "She humiliates my mom, she talks down to me, and you never say a word." He looked up from his tie, barely listening. "She's just like that. She'll come around once we're married. Don't let it ruin the weekend." That was it. That was all he gave me. Now, I saw it clearly. That calm dismissal, that was the betrayal. Not dramatic, not loud, just empty. He hadn't defended me last night because he never had. He wasn't shocked by Margaret's words. He was only shocked I reacted. I set the coffee down and started moving. I opened drawers, gathered the wedding items, cards, menus, candles, the Mr. and Mrs. sign my best friend had made. I tossed them into a box. Every object had weight, not from what it was, but what it reminded me of. Then I pulled up my phone. Blocked his number. Deleted our photos, one by one. Not out of spite, out of space. I needed room to breathe. My mother stirred behind me. I turned. She sat up slowly, her eyes meeting mine. "You don't have to say sorry," I said before she could speak. "You never did anything wrong." She didn't answer, but the tears in her eyes weren't from guilt. They were from release. We sat together in the quiet. For the first time, it didn't feel heavy. "I think we should leave town for a bit," I said. "Just you and me. Anywhere but here." She nodded. Then she stood and walked to her purse. Pulled out something. Placed it in my hand. The handkerchief. Clean, pressed, folded like the day she gave it to me. It wasn't magic, but it was steady. It reminded me where I came from. That evening, I sat at my desk. Not crying, not wallowing, just still. Silence, I realized, isn't always weakness. Sometimes, it's a breath. A pause before the real answer. I wasn't ready for revenge. But I was done pretending I didn't see things clearly. I passed the mirror on my way to bed. My face looked the same. But my eyes? My eyes had stopped asking for permission. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked it up without thinking. And froze. It was a voice I hadn't heard in months. Just after I answered Evelyn's call, I sat in my car in the parking lot, engine off, windows halfway down. The late afternoon breeze felt colder than the Houston sun used to. Evelyn's voice remained on speaker. "You need to know what your mother-in-law said after you left," she began. She sounded shaken. "It started at the charity lunch last spring." I waited, arms crossed on the steering wheel. Hesitation felt familiar. I'd gone through enough of these moments. But I agreed, because I wanted to hear something true. Evelyn described the room. A long banquet table, sun shining through the club's windows, laughter around plates of shrimp and crab cakes. I pulled the hand-embroidered handkerchief out of the glove compartment and held it loosely in my lap. That gift from Mom, once quiet, now heavy. She praised his ex-girlfriend, Evelyn said. My lungs squeezed. She said she was always so polished, so composed. My mother's voice disappeared from the memory. I had worked for years in nonprofit support groups. I had advised mothers who thought they weren't enough. Not a word of that work mattered in the room. Mom just misses who she used to know, Alec had told me, standing just feet away. He was supposed to be my partner. But he stopped being mine when he allowed them to erase me from their script. The color in the world muted a little. I gripped the steering wheel. Evelyn said, "They weren't just ignoring you. They were trying to delete you." That cut deep, because deletion is the opposite of love. It's abandonment clothed in civility. Then she added, "I'm sorry I stayed silent. I realized I'd be next." The car rocked slightly when the engine turned over. I didn't move. Past reflections of streetlights glowed on my windshield. Weeks earlier, I had sat at that engagement dinner in Margaret's estate. Soft jazz. Chords that meant wealth. Margaret rose and raised a toast to legacy. "Family is tradition. We pass down what matters," she said. I raised my glass, smiled as though I believed. I thought I belonged. The bracelet came later. Margaret singled it out, an heirloom. She slid it onto my wrist, thin gold band with a small diamond. "This is for you now," she said. I thanked her, hugged. Inside, I felt the weight of an outsider wearing someone else's proof. Evelyn's voice crackled back. "That bracelet? It wasn't meant for you." I let it fall back into the glove compartment, the metal cold against leather. Margaret's voice echoed, "Well, she might as well wear it. It's just jewelry now." I realized then that I was not chosen. I was tolerated, a placeholder, someone to hold the image until the real one returned. I looked up from the wheel. The city loomed behind me, office towers, lights blinking, lives moving. I thought of my mother in that small corner of the banquet room. She wasn't the woman they saw. She was the one who taught me to fight for dignity. She was the one I had promised to protect. And I had walked down that aisle thinking it would protect her. Instead, it protected them. Silence isn't safety. It's the absence of protest. I returned home, parked the car, walked inside without making a sound. I didn't drop the handkerchief. I didn't hide it. I placed it on the kitchen table next to my phone. I didn't call Alec. I didn't pack a suitcase. I just sat. Reflection filled the house. Evelyn told me why she reached out now. Because they broke me publicly, but she saw I wasn't alone. She said, "If you'd spoken earlier, I might have." And that admission felt like a bridge built on shared regret. I didn't offer forgiveness. I listened. Because this time the truth got to speak first. Outside a window, a slight breeze stirred the curtains. I thought of the bracelet in its box, the lunch table, the laugh that wasn't mine to wear. I thought of every time I let kindness dull my edges. I thought of the corner of the banquet hall. I thought of the moment I stood up in my dress and walked out of a wedding that wasn't mine. And then I heard the rustle under the windshield wiper. I stepped outside again. The night was still early. The letter under the blade of my wiper read, "You don't know me, but I saw how they treated you." I slipped the envelope into my coat, tightened grip. I knew exactly whose handwriting it had to be. I shouldn't have gone. But there I was, parked in front of the Keene Country Club, the heat of Houston unkind and the memory of last week still clinging. Margaret's invitation said, "Let's have a brunch," like nothing had exploded. The word reconciliation hovered in the air like a challenge. I took a breath and walked in, remembering how one polite smile can hide years of judgment. The marble foyer reflected my shoes, heels that felt like armor. My mother was already seated at a far table, folded hands like she'd been prepared to sit through this, and worse. I greeted Margaret with a measured hug. She said, "I'm glad you came," and looked right through me. I nodded. Tonight, I'd find out whether I was sitting at the table or still behind it. Brunch began normal enough, champagne flutes, light conversation, charity talk, until it didn't. I stood near the refreshment station, stirring my coffee, when a woman beside me said, "Miss, could you help coordinate the seating?" I froze. My head turned toward Alec, who was nearby, quiet, smiling. My wedding dress photo flashed in my memory, me beside him in front of our 304 guests, believing I was joining a family. But in that instant, I was mistaken for the event planner. My mother's face paled across the room. Inside me something cracked. I walked down the aisle to get married, not serve the reception, I thought. I lowered my voice and said, "I'm not with the staff." Her eyebrows rose. "Oh my, sorry, I assumed you look so comfortable." I bit back a retort. The burning sting of being invisible cloaked as compliment. Alec chuckled quietly, as though he found this amusing. The realization hit. I wasn't just overlooked, I was diminished. That moment built a fire inside me. I refused to breathe silently again. Margaret floated over, gesturing to the table she intended for me, still wearing the same smile. "We're so glad you could help out, dear," she said, placing a light hand on my shoulder. "It means a lot." I met her gaze. "Help out?" I asked softly, my tone calm but firm. She tilted her head, the smile faltering. "Oh, come on now, don't sweat it. We're just doing our best to move on." Her words hovered heavy. I realized she meant move on from me. I caught Perla's eyes across the table, the grandmother, watching with that combination of disappointment and satisfaction. I leaned forward. "I'm not here to assist your image," I said, voice steady. "I'm here to reclaim mine." The statement sat in the air. Margaret's face shifted from practiced calm to something brittle. The servers paused mid-step. The room felt tighter. Then came Deidre. The clatter of soup spoons paused. She stood up by the podium with the microphone in her hand, unexpected, unwavering. "If you think she's just here to serve," she said, the room swallowing her words, "you're still missing the point." My heart raced. I stayed seated, watching. Alec's face threatened to collapse. Margaret's smile faltered. Deidre's voice rose. "I've watched this family sit in kindness while smothering someone under it. You cannot call that generosity when you erase the person." Gasps rippled through the tables. My mother rose from her chair, silent, but present. I gripped the handkerchief in my purse. My mother's gift, now felt stronger than ever. I realized then that brunch wasn't a social affair, it was a battleground. And I wasn't playing by their rules. I stood quietly, said, "Excuse me," and walked away. I left plates and frosted glasses behind. In the restroom, I looked in the mirror and saw someone different, someone not broken. I held the handkerchief in my palm, embroidered dandelions frayed at the edges now representing survival. "I will not wait for permission to live my truth," I whispered. The outside air felt heavy as I opened the door. I stepped into it nonetheless, leaving the laughter and champagne behind. In the parking lot, I unlocked my car. My phone buzzed once. No name. The message read, "You think you're done? Wait till you see what comes next." My stomach twisted but my spine straightened. I tucked the phone in my coat, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. I was ready. The air in my studio felt thicker than usual. I locked the door behind me, letting the silence settle before opening my laptop. The soft hum of the machine powered up as the screen lit my face. The room was dim, but I didn't need light for what I was about to do. My mother knocked gently and entered with a mug of coffee. I glanced at her and shook my head. "Not now," I whispered. She nodded, said nothing, and backed out quietly. I pulled up the folders I'd labeled weeks ago, painstakingly gathered, cross-checked, tucked away like ammo waiting for the right day. Video files, emails, receipts. One folder stood out, private wedding footage. I hovered over it, then clicked. Margaret's voice echoed through my speakers, and I didn't flinch this time. My mind whispered what I hadn't dared say out loud until now. They thought silence meant I'd lost. They never understood silence was time I was buying. I shut everything down, grabbed my keys, and walked to the car. The sun had started to dip. Houston bathed in amber, and I was done waiting. The keen corporate suite buzzed with tension when I arrived. Suits lined the long boardroom table, voices hushed. Margaret sat at the head, posture flawless, mouth a practiced smile. I walked in, calm but not quiet. I set up my laptop, turned toward the room, and said, "I have something to share." The projector clicked on, and the footage rolled. Margaret stood in her pearls, pointing at the wedding decorations. "That photo, take it down," she snapped. "We don't need that kind of history here." The decorators hesitated, but followed orders. The screen went black. No one moved. Then I spoke. "That was my mother's photo. The only thing from my family displayed that day. And you erased it, at my own wedding." Margaret's hand curled into a fist on the table. A couple of the board members shifted, uneasy. One man looked down at his notes like they might disappear. Another woman glanced at Margaret, then at me, back and forth. The tide was turning, quietly. I wasn't just dismissed. I was rewritten out of my own story, I said. And some of you knew it. I sat. Silence. Then, clapping. Sparse, but sincere. A man near the end of the table leaned back, nodding slightly. For the first time, Margaret didn't speak first. Robert Hayes, red-faced and stiff, stood. "This is highly inappropriate. You're breaching confidentiality." I turned toward him. "Confidentiality? You mean when your family paraded lies in front of 300 guests and press coverage?" "I think that contract expired." He stepped forward, voice rising. "You're crossing a line." I didn't let him finish. I reached into my bag and took out a soft, white handkerchief. My mother had embroidered it by hand. I placed it on the table like a final piece in a puzzle. "This is what was erased. What you tried to make disappear." Margaret didn't move. Her smile was gone. Her fingers twitched at the edge of her notepad. My mother stood at the back of the room, quiet, proud, like she had been for years. I opened another folder from my bag and slid it across to the CFO. "You should see this." He opened it. His eyes scanned the papers. The silence this time was different, darker. "These audits," I said, "show funds from Margaret's charity funneled into shell accounts. The same accounts paid for the decorators who followed her instructions." The CFO looked up. "This is dated months before the event." I nodded. "They rebranded the charity 3 times in 5 years. Different names, same tax ID. The numbers don't lie." Someone whispered, "They've been doing this for years." Margaret's voice cracked. "That's speculation." I turned to her. "It's evidence." She tried to speak again, but the CFO raised his hand. "We'll need to investigate this immediately." I stood slowly, collected my things. The embroidered cloth. The laptop. My voice stayed calm. "You'll hear more," I said, "but I won't wait for you to believe me. I'm done asking." The board watched in silence as I stepped away. The door opened, and my mother stood waiting. She gave me that look only a mother can give, equal parts relief and awe. I nodded, and we walked out together. Outside, the Houston skyline was lit up like nothing had ever gone wrong. But inside, everything had shifted. I took a deep breath. It didn't taste like victory, it tasted like release. I slipped the handkerchief back into my coat pocket and murmured, "I reclaim my name." My phone buzzed. I checked it. "This morning's meeting is being leaked to media. Have you seen the headline yet?" I stepped into my living room and the phone buzzed like an alarm clock I'd ignored for too long. Notifications flooded in, emails, texts, social buzz, and the headline hit me before I saw the details: Bride sues branding firm. My agency's name in bold, connected to a 304-guest wedding gone wrong. My mom sat on the couch, quiet but alert, her eyes tracking the screen. I told her softly, "They wanted control. I made them visible." She nodded, her subtle pride steadying me. The question wasn't whether to fight, they knew the war had started. The question was, were they ready? Just hours after the boardroom footage dropped, something else exploded online. A catering staff member recorded a clip at the wedding, unplanned, raw, and it went public. On the video, Margaret's voice sliced through the crowd. "We don't let people like that become face of our events." Her hand flicked toward my mother's table. The phrase, "people like that," hung heavy in the room, full of unspoken contempt. The clip hit 100,000 views within hours. News outlets dug in. My phone rang with interviews, legal offers, agencies wanting to collaborate. I answered none of them. I watched the chaos evolve around me. Control flipped. I wasn't hiding anymore, my truth was exposed and so was theirs. My pulse wasn't racing, I felt steady. This was vindication, but I knew the storm wasn't over. Then they struck back. Margaret called an emergency meeting, PR teams, lawyers, old money faces with polished resentment. "Is this a vendetta?" one asked, voice low in a marble room heavy with pretense. I stood outside the door, eavesdropping on panic dressed as strategy. They weren't defending a wedding. They were defending an empire built on silence. I walked in. The room shifted. I said softly, "An empire built on silence is built to collapse." The words landed. I could see anxiety behind the composed exteriors. This was no longer about me. This was their fear. As if that weren't enough, the next punch came in the form of private messages. Screenshots forwarded to me by Deidre, bridesmaids laughing about my mother's accent, joking about my dress, making, "just the help," comments with humor. I opened them and I didn't flinch. The world saw it now. Outlets published. Inside the elite family's text chat, "just the help." Their status shield cracked. The power balance shifted. I sat back and watched the building tremble under its own weight. I felt morally clear. I felt ready. I stepped outside later, dusk around me, Houston lights buzzing. My phone kept alerting me, texts, mentions, tags. I paused on the sidewalk. I chose not to engage on their level, not to waste energy on vindictive moves. Instead I decided, build something new. A brand, a voice, a community that believed exactly what happened to me shouldn't stay hidden. My mother sat beside me in the car. I told her quietly, "We'll start with truth. Then we'll grow." She smiled softly, proud in her quiet way. At midnight, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find a plain manila envelope on the mat. No return address. No note inside, just typed words on the outside. "You won't like what you find inside." I picked it up, felt the weight of the paper. The war had just begun. I pulled into the Civic Center garage, headlights cutting through the low haze of a Houston evening. Concrete, wet from a passing drizzle, shimmered like a stage floor before curtains opened. For a second, I sat still. The weight of it all pressed into my ribs, but not like before. This time, it wasn't dread. It was readiness. I stepped out, heels echoing off the walls, dressed in clean lines, no apologies. My mother stood by the entrance, holding white lilies. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I nodded once, and we walked through the doors together. Inside, the Women in Leadership Gala buzzed with polished politeness and camera flashes. The air wasn't tense, it was alert. As I passed a group of women in navy suits, I caught one whisper, "That's her." I smiled, but only inwardly. I thought to myself, this time, they're on my turf. When it was my turn to speak, the applause died quick. I took the mic slowly, letting the silence stretch. "I'm not here to reclaim a seat," I said. "I'm here to build a new table." Behind me, footage began to roll, wedding clips, the boardroom exchange, text messages. No narration, just truth. I let the crowd see Margaret's words in her own voice, her own disdain. And when the financial records flickered onto the screen, I didn't need to explain. The audience saw the story, the pattern, the rot. Suddenly, Margaret's face appeared on a live feed. She tried to speak, her voice crackling through the speakers. "This is not." Security muted her. I didn't blink. I continued, "For 304 guests, they built a stage for my humiliation. Tonight, I return the favor with something better, accountability." Gasps, then silence, then claps. Not loud, steady. Not polite, genuine. Some women wiped away tears. Others nodded hard. They weren't applauding revenge. They were recognizing justice. After the event, I slipped backstage. Alex stood alone in the hallway, eyes on the floor like a schoolboy who knew he'd blown it. He tried to smirk. Quite the show. I stopped short. "Your silence at my wedding cost more than you understand." He opened his mouth like he might argue, then thought better. I kept walking. Past Alec. Past Margaret. Past the donors who looked anywhere but at me. My mother met me near the exit. "You did right," she said, handing me the lilies. I nodded, eyes forward. Cameras caught the moment. her hand in mine, our faces calm. The power had shifted and everyone in that building knew it. Back home the next morning, I turned on the news. Their family's charity board had resigned. Shareholders had called for a full audit. Headlines ran, "Bride's evidence topples legacy." I sat in the same spot where I once cried over a ruined reception. The lilies now sat next to that embroidered handkerchief, both symbols, but neither of loss. I called Deidre. They thought I'd stay quiet. But the truth speaks louder than a wedding toast. And it hit me. Their legacy was never real. It was just something rehearsed, manicured, propped up by image. And image doesn't survive the raw light of truth. I turned on my laptop and opened a new document, Project Elevated Voices. At the top I typed, "For every woman told she didn't belong, this table welcomes you." My mother walked in, quiet as always. She placed the lilies beside my desk, smiled, and walked back out. I looked out the window, same skyline, but I'd never see it the same way again. Just before noon, the doorbell rang. A courier stood holding another manila envelope. No logo, no smile. Just a flat envelope with one sticker across the back, "Final chapter enclosed." I stood there, envelope in hand, letting the weight of it sit with me. Sunday morning light poured into the living room like a soft hush. Houston was quiet for once, and so was I. The sealed manila envelope from the night before sat on the table, untouched. I made coffee first, just how I like it, then sat down across from it, as if giving the thing a moment to breathe. Eventually, I opened it. No legal stamp, no signature, just handwriting I hadn't seen in years, but recognized instantly, Delilah. "You never knew me," the letter began, "but I knew you." I watched everything unfold, and I said nothing. That silence. It bought me safety, but it cost you too much. This is what I owe. There was a USB tucked in the fold. I hesitated, then plugged it into my laptop. The screen lit up, her face, older, wearier than I remembered. Her voice shook but didn't falter. "What they did to you," she said, "what Margaret planned, what Alec allowed, it wasn't just unkind. It was orchestrated, and I knew. I'm sorry I didn't stop it when I could have." She laid it all out, audio clips, records, dates. Coercion, manipulation, money trails. Her voice cracked once, then steadied. "I'm done being quiet," she said. "Use this, however you need." I sat still long after the video ended. I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange release. A weight I'd carried so long I forgot what my back felt like without it. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. "This isn't about revenge," I said. "This is record. This is closure." Outside, birds chirped. I closed the laptop, poured another cup of coffee, and stepped out onto the patio. My mother was already out there, flipping through the paper, her hair still damp from the shower. She glanced at me, eyes knowing. The phone buzzed. "Girl, you are all over the morning news again," Deidre's voice came through, laughing. "Want me to save you a copy or 10? I laughed too. "Just clip the ones where I don't look like I'm mid-blink." We talked for a while, mostly about nothing. Then she asked, "You still want to do that podcast? The table we built?" I smiled. "Yeah, I think it's time." She paused. "You ever think peace would feel this quiet?" I looked at the light hitting my coffee, then out at the yard. "Not like this. But I'm grateful for it." Later that afternoon, I opened my email. Among the usual noise, one subject line caught my eye. "You don't know me, but I saw you." It was from a woman who'd been at the wedding. She hadn't spoken up then. But now, she had something to say. "I remember what they said about your mother's accent. I remember how they treated you, like you were just background. And I stayed quiet. But watching you, I couldn't anymore. You reminded me my voice still matters." I stared at the screen for a while. Then typed one line back. "Thank you for using it." It wasn't about toppling names anymore. It was about building space, for voices that had been overlooked, dismissed, ignored. Late in the day, I walked out back to the garden. My mother joined me. We dug into the soil together, the way we had when I was little. This time, we planted a new rose bush. White blooms. Fresh, full, almost defiant. "Fresh soil," she said, brushing her hands. "Fresh start." "No more ghosts," I said. "Just growth." We both laughed as the breeze picked up, carrying the scent of earth and bloom and something cleaner. Back inside, I poured 2 glasses of iced tea. We sat quietly, letting the day ease out around us. When the sun dipped low, my phone buzzed again. A new message, just one line. Zayla, would you consider being our keynote speaker? I read it once, then again, and smiled.